prey to a man who shot and killed 60 of them on the Las Vegas Strip. It was the worst mass shooting in modern U.S. history. For many, it's still hard to process. I'm Joe Shaneman, a Henderson father who lost his son, a former Metro officer, and a former reporter join us. 9 this morning on State of Nevada.
Support for Nevada Public Radio comes from Boulder City Hospital Foundation, announcing Art in the Park. Hundreds of fine art and craft artists, live music, food, and more. Saturday and Sunday, October 2nd and 3rd. Information and maps at artinthepark.org. And from the Vegas Chamber of Commerce, proud to include the Vegas Golden Knights in its member roster. The Vegas Chamber represents the Las Vegas business interests at the local, state, and national levels. More information at vegaschamber.com. It's 8:43. A high today in Las Vegas in the mid-80s. Right now it's 69. 49 in Panaca, 30 in Elko.
I'm Peter O'Dowd. Alaska's grizzly bears are gorging themselves on salmon and getting ridiculously fat for the long winter ahead. One fella named Chunk, he's real big.
He just had a big butt, and that's how he got his nickname. And he's grown into his nickname. He's a very pudgy bear.
Will Chunk be crowned the fattest bear of the year? That's next time on Here and Now.
This morning from 10 to noon on KNPR and knpr.org.
Good morning, I'm Martinez. Casey McPerry got a random text from an Amazon delivery driver who was asking for a ladder. That's because the driver accidentally launched a package onto the roof of Casey's house while trying to swat away a bug. The honest mistake was captured on a security camera and posted to TikTok. Makes me wonder, though, how big was that bug? Well, anyway, Casey eventually climbed onto the roof, and sure enough, the package, safe, sound, and hopefully bug-free. It's Morning Edition.
Support for NPR comes from this station and from the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, supporting an equitable recovery and the reinvention of systems to create a more just, inclusive, and resilient world. More information is at macfound.org. From American Jewish World Service, supporting human rights advocates worldwide as they respond to COVID-19 and defend democratic rights. Learn more at ajws.org. And from the Annie E. Casey Foundation.
It's Morning Edition from NPR News. I'm Noel King.
And I'm A. Martinez. Afghanistan's economy has only worsened since the Taliban have taken power. From the team at Planet Money, Erica Barris reports.
Afghanistan is what economists call dollarized. The dollar is used to buy everything from a soda to a house. To use the dollar, you need dollars. So a few times a week for the last 3 years, a shipment of paper money would arrive in Afghanistan. Ajmal Ahmadi was the governor of the central bank, Afghanistan's version of the Federal Reserve. His last day was the same day the Taliban took over Kabul. That day, a shipment of U.S. dollars that was supposed to arrive hadn't.
That would have caused a severe economic issue under normal circumstances. And so we were trying to resolve how we could potentially deal with that under the assumption that the government would continue.
The government didn't continue, and dollars haven't come in since. Foreign aid, that accounted for 75% of spending, stopped. Ahmadi says Afghanistan imports way more than it exports. It needs those dollars.
It's going to be much more challenging to pay for those imports that previously came into Afghanistan.
The country has $9 billion in rainy day fund money held by the Federal Reserve, but that money isn't being released to the Taliban. Afghanistan does have its own currency, though, the Afghani, but doesn't have a printing press. Like many smaller economies, it relies on companies in other countries to print their money. Simon Gray with the IMF has worked on monetary policy for decades. He says those companies probably will print and send banknotes to the Taliban.
When you have the sort of change of regime that we've seen in Afghanistan and the new government is not internationally recognized, banknote printers can't just give new banknotes to the people who happen to be in charge.
A regime change, a potential dearth of currency. This sounds very familiar to economist Thomas Simpson, a former advisor to the Federal Reserve Board who worked in Iraq in 2003. The Iraqi currency is the dinar. For years, Iraq had its banknotes printed abroad, but after the First Gulf War, they couldn't anymore. So Baghdad's central bank started to print its own. These were informally called Saddam dinars, and they weren't quite the same quality. But both sets remained in circulation, and people knew they weren't the same. Like one was more valued than the other one. They knew that if you went to a store, and a store owner would know that too then.
Oh, absolutely. I think it was greater than 20 to 1. The old dinars had that much more purchasing power than the Saddam dinars. The Saddam dinars just kept dropping in terms of their value.
Simpson says something like that could happen if the Taliban found a way to print its own currency. For Ajmal Ahmadi, who established monetary systems and protocols in Afghanistan, watching this is difficult.
I spent 7-8 years trying to put systems in place to improve the economic situation of the country, and we've moved in a complete opposite direction. So it's heartbreaking.
There's a lot of uncertainty in Afghanistan after the American departure and the Taliban takeover. Afghanistan's got a lot to figure out. Not just how to pay for things, but what kind of money to do with it. Erica Barris, NPR News.
Support for Planet Money comes from CrowdStrike. CrowdStrike's Falcon platform uses their threat graph to analyze behavior on devices, servers, and cloud workloads to find threats and stop them. More at crowdstrike.com/ransomware.
This is NPR News.
I'm Rick Andrews, KNPR News. Several tributes are taking place in Las Vegas today and tonight, honoring the victims of the mass shooting that took place 4 years ago today at the Route 91 Harvest Music Festival in Las Vegas. Planned remembrances include a reading of the victims' names this evening at a downtown Las Vegas community healing garden. All of today's events are listed online at the Vegas Strong Resiliency Center. On today's State of Nevada show, we talked to a former Metro officer, former reporter, and a man who lost his young son in the shooting. That's this morning at 9 on KNPR. New research shows strong support for conservation efforts in several key western states. Bert Johnson with the Mountain West News Bureau explains.
Data for Progress is a self-described progressive research group. It surveyed likely voters from states with lawmakers who will be crucial to passing President Joe Biden's environmental agenda. In Nevada, more than 3/4 of likely voters favor Biden's conservation initiative. He would set aside 30% of the country's land and water over the next decade. Danielle Diceroth helped lead the study, which took place as the Caldor fire was forcing people to evacuate from around Lake Tahoe.
Visceral images of seeing, areas of our country ablaze or underwater, I think are really causing the reckoning with people that we need to come together and preserve the nature that we have.
Diceroth and her colleagues found conservation had bipartisan support. They also found a majority of likely voters in Colorado and Montana support Biden's plan to move the country to 100% clean energy by the year 2035. For the Mountain West News Bureau, I'm Bert Johnson.
You can find more of the day's news at knpr.org.
It's Morning Edition from NPR News. I'm Noel King.
I'm Amy Martinez.
And I'm Rachel Martin. A decade ago, jazz icon Tony Bennett and pop superstar Lady Gaga struck up one of the great odd couple partnerships in recent music history. Singing together first on his album Duets 2 and then on their co-album Cheek to Cheek, they made history on the charts and proved some things never go out of style.
I've got you under my skin.
He is 95 years old and has been living with Alzheimer's. Nate Chinen from Jazz Night in America and member station WBGO recently talked with Lady Gaga about her collaboration with Tony Bennett, and Nate is here to talk with us about it. Hey, Nate.
Hey, Rachel.
You have covered this relationship from the very beginning. Were you surprised that it worked so well?
Yeah, on one level I was. You know, you think about the two of them, there's a 60-year age difference between